All right, class, let's talk about price floors and price ceilings. First, let's talk about price ceilings. It's a legal maximum, the price that sellers may charge for a product. So as you see here, the balloons are rising and they are stopping at the ceiling. We got our glass ceiling here. Imagine a bunch of helium balloons. They are stopping at the ceiling. It's a legal maximum price. It can't go any higher than that ceiling. Now, a price floor is a legal minimum price that buyers must pay for a product, and it cannot go below the floor legally. And so an example of this would be like the government requiring milk, corn, or some other agricultural product to sell at a minimum price. So let's think through this for a second. Let's think of a consequence of a price floor. Does this encourage farmers or discourage farmers to provide their goods? If they know for a fact that they're guaranteed at least a certain price. So if the market goes crazy and no one wants to buy corn, they're still guaranteed they're going to get a minimum price for their corn. Would that encourage a farmer to grow more corn or less corn? Hopefully you're thinking it's going to encourage a farmer to grow more corn, because that's what it does in a sense. Farmers will take more risks because they know that they'll at least get a certain amount of money for their corn. So that's an example of a price floor and a small consequence of a price floor when it comes to like agricultural products. Another price floor is a minimum wage. We'll talk more about a minimum wage and how it's a price floor, but basically the definition is a legal minimum amount that an employer must pay for 1 hour of work. You can't pay someone lower than that wage. So we'll talk more about that as we go along here. So when you look at a demand and supply graph, you have to ask yourself a few things. Every time you do, you have to say, okay, what's the product being sold? Well, it looks like widgets, right? We're looking at widgets, okay? So that's the product. Then the next thing you ask yourself is, who is the consumer in this demand supply curve? Well, the consumer, pretty obvious, those who want widgets. So they're the people demanding the widgets. And then the next question is, who is supplying the widgets? Well, the producers of the widgets. They're going to be the suppliers. Seems pretty obvious right now, but you'll see how it's important to understand this a little bit later, all the more. And another question you always want to ask is, what's the equilibrium price? And in this case, the equilibrium price where demand and supply intersect, that's going to be $3. And the equilibrium quantity is going to be 4 widgets, 4 million widgets. All right, so now let's talk about minimum wage here. A minimum wage, first of all, it's a price floor. And it's going to be right up here at this black line. So let's look at this again. We're going to ask ourselves those questions again. Who are the consumers in this case? But first, before the consumers, what's the product? Well, the product is quantity supplied of minimum wage workers. So the product being sold is minimum wage workers. Okay, so that means that the suppliers in this case are the people who are selling their minimum wage work. So that's probably like a lot of you guys in class. You probably get paid minimum wage. And so you would be the suppliers. And as the wage went up, more and more of you would be willing to supply your working, your labor. And then of course the demanders in this case are the producers in a sense. They're the ones who are making widgets, or they're the ones who are making fries, they're the ones who are making burgers, right? They're demanding your labor. So it's kind of unique in this sense that the producers of products and services out there are the consumers of the labor. So anyway, so let's look at this for a second now. We've got a minimum wage up here. And let's say the market wage, so the market equilibrium, let's say that's $1, $2, $3, $4. That's for $4 an hour. But the minimum wage is $6 an hour, let's say. And so that's saying that no worker can pay someone below $6 an hour. But of course, the producers, the people who are consuming the labor, they, as the wage goes down, they buy less and less. As the wage goes down, they're willing to buy more and more of your labor. But of course, as the price goes up, well, they can't do that. They'll use machines instead to it's like do robots to do your work instead of you doing the work. And so anyways, so up here at this price of $6 an hour, there's plenty of people who are willing to supply their labor. In this case, let's say it's 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, 5 million people willing to supply their labor, but we've got only 2 million people demanding that labor. So we have a surplus of 3 million people looking for jobs. This is called unemployment. This gap right here is unemployment. And so some people say, hey, all we got to do to get rid of unemployment is to get rid of the minimum wage. Well, they wouldn't get rid of all unemployment, but it would get rid of those people who are unemployed at the bottom, minimum wage workers. There'd still be other people, college graduates and stuff like that, maybe would be unemployed as well. But it would probably help if we got rid of that price floor minimum wage. All right, so let's talk about some other ones here. What's some other examples to help you understand this? So let's talk about corn and other agricultural products. Oftentimes, these are considered to be price floors. So when you think about, okay, which of these two lines is probably a price floor, visually you think, oh, the blue line looks like the floor, and this looks like the ceiling. But you'd be wrong. The black dotted line is the floor. You have to think about it like a floor. It can't go below the floor. And so again, this would encourage the agricultural farmers who make corn. They're going to be guaranteed $8 for their corn instead of the market price, which would have been $6. And so they're going to supply a lot more, right? They're going to supply 35 maybe million versus 15 million, right? And so there's going to be a surplus. And so the government, if they create a price floor, there's usually a surplus. And so, yeah, last week someone asked a question about what is a subsidy, and sometimes people use the word subsidy to describe what the government does right here. Sometimes the government will pay farmers not to grow a certain amount of crops so as to not have a surplus of corn and not have wasted corn in a sense. And so that is technically not a surplus. It's technically not a subsidy in the economic sense, but it is in the in everyday language. So in economics, this buying up of that surplus is not a subsidy, but in everyday language, people might call it that. So anyways, so yeah, the government might do that. Also, when this first started to become a thing during the Great Depression, our government actually, if it was like cattle, or they would kill the cattle, or they even burned crops. In some places, they still burned crops to get rid of that surplus. And so that is a cost to a price floor. So just something to think about. Now, of course, now let's talk about a price ceiling. Now, again, you might think right away, oh, a price ceiling is going to be the black line, but nope, a price ceiling is deceiving again. It's going to be the blue line. And just think about like a balloon. A balloon is not going to go above the line. It's going to keep bouncing off the top like a helium balloon. And so the price cannot go above that price. So for example, think of like a cancer drug. They could sell that drug for like millions of dollars because it's going to cure cancer and people are willing to pay whatever. But the government says, that's ridiculous. We're not going to have people pay ridiculous high prices up here. So we're going to force the medical companies to have a price ceiling. So they have to charge a lower price. Well, what ends up happening? Well, what's a consequence here? Well, a consequence is, of course, at the top there's surpluses, at the bottom there's shortages. In this case, again, there's going to be a shortage. There's 35 million, let's say, demanded, but only 15 million supplied, because again, as price goes down, they're like, I'm not going to make that drug, I'm going to make some other drug, or they just can't keep in business, so they go out of business or something. And so anyway, so there's less quantity supplied, and so 15 minus our 35 gives us how much our surplus is, I believe, sorry, our shortage is. So I believe that's 20. 15 minus 35? That sounds right, I think. So anyways, a shortage of 20. Well, what do we do? How do we fix that issue? Well, maybe we can ration. Rationing is a government system for allocating goods and services using criteria other than price. So what are some ways we could ration? Well, we could do first come, first serve, or we could do one per family, or we could do some sort of thing like we have with our heart transplant thing is a little different. You can see here David Rockefeller gets 7th heart transplant at age 101. So maybe our heart transplant system is deficient. And that's something you're going to debate about later when I get back. But anyways, so we could also do like for a medical, maybe people who are the most sick, most in need get a heart. Maybe the person who's the most wealthiest gets their first heart, right? There's all sorts of different ways to ration. And so we'll talk about heart rationing a little bit later. But that's a result of a price ceiling. You have to deal with rationing. And with price ceilings or even price floors, a black market can emerge. Again, quick definition: illegal buying or selling in violation of price controls or rationing, or illegal items in general. So for example, drugs of any kind, those are going to be a equilibrium price of 0 in a sense. And anything above 0, that's a price ceiling of 0. Anything above 0 is illegal. But there is definitely still demand and supply of drugs. And so that's an example. So let's take a quick detour for a second. Let's talk about some examples of black markets for a second. So in World War II, we had some price rationing of different things. For example, food items, and gas and other things like that, so that our troops would have enough of those things to fight in the war. Of course, as this little funny thing is showing, there was plenty of people who were breaking the rules, and so they had to create little propaganda posters to try and encourage people to, follow the rules and only pay using their ration stamps. So that's one example of a black market in America. But let's take a moment and talk about North Korea black markets.
We don't really know what life is like inside North Korea. We do know that it's ruled by this guy. We know that it's the subject of numerous insane rumors, and we know that the sealed borders prevent us from learning much of anything else. But one thing that is becoming a little bit more clear is the state of the Hermit Kingdom's economy, one that may have been built on the backs of smugglers and the black market. For the most part, the economy in North Korea is run by the government. That includes imports, exports, and manufacturing. In fact, private trade is illegal, but that doesn't stop it from happening. Over the last couple of decades, North Koreans have developed a gray market, or an informal economy, one that's not monitored, controlled, or taxed by the government. And according to one North Korea expert, its success can be partially attributed to Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un policy is remarkably friendly towards the private businesses, because his father was uncertain. He oscillated from toleration of the private economy to occasional support of the private economy, and then back to attempts to eradicate private economy. Kim Jong-un's policy is different. It's a quite tacit approval and encouragement and support of the private economic activities.
And if that's true, if Kim Jong-un really does support more private business, then this is big news. Sure, he still might rule the country with Dark Age tactics, like using executions as a means to flex his power, but he is North Korea's first leader in a long time to support an economic system that even slightly resembles a free market. But it's not just Kim Jong-un who's helping the North Korean economy. The gray market has origins in a flourishing black market, one that was brought upon by a devastating famine in the mid-1990s. Back then, the government had a public distribution system that gave out food to its citizens based on political affiliation and loyalty. The famine collapsed this system and forced citizens to fend for themselves. Insert black market here. North Korean leadership knew that they had to either look the other way or see their people starve. But the black market soon grew past its origins and became a place for goods that were illegal or unavailable. This is Kim Danby, a North Korean defector who started working in the black market at the age of 13, helping smuggle in items from China.
The products I usually smuggled were the ones that everyone can use. I would illegally import electronic goods like television sets, refrigerators, rice cookers. I also smuggled cosmetics, face masks, and clothes that women like, and even needles and hair extensions.
This was the groundwork for today's North Korean gray market, which in turn may be laying the groundwork for an actual private sector. This is an economy that went from Kim Jong-il parceling out meager food rations to the opening of a department store in Pyongyang in 2010, shelves stocked high with imported goods priced only in US dollars. No one knows for sure where North Korea's economy will go from here, but they seem to be tiptoeing towards a free market, which could ultimately lead to looser borders. But for now, those borders remain very much closed. The country is still cloaked in wild rumors, and this guy is still in charge. Yes, he may support the gray economy, and yes, he may be more economically progressive than his father or grandfather, but he is still an unpredictable leader who may have just executed a military general for falling asleep in a meeting. So really, who can tell what lies ahead for North Korea, its economy, or its people?
So as you can see, North Korea has its own black market. Everything above zero sold there is technically illegal. So they have a price ceiling on everything. Kind of crazy. All right, so let's talk about your homework. Part of your homework is previously was to find 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages of price ceilings, and now you're doing and 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages of price floors. That was your previous homework. I want you to add 2 more now. 2 more advantages and 2 more disadvantages. 2 more advantages, 2 more disadvantages. So make sure you do that. Let's talk about football stadium tickets for a second. Football stadium tickets are, especially college football stadium tickets, are known for having a price ceiling. There's plenty of people who are willing to pay for the lower prices, but there's a fixed amount. So in this case, it wouldn't be a green supply curve, but it would be just a straight line of, let's say, 25 million. That doesn't make sense. 25,000 seats or something. I don't know what a typical football stadium is, but 25,000 seats or something would be your fixed amount. But why would a college football stadium, why wouldn't they charge more? Because their supply curve would intersect up here versus having a price ceiling down here. What's the logic? Why would they do this? Well, supposedly I've heard them argue that they have a price ceiling in a sense on football tickets, so that college students will be able to afford to show up to the game. Otherwise, you'd have just a bunch of rich people showing up to the game, cheering on the team, and you wouldn't see any of the students, in a sense, there to support the team. And so supposedly that's why they have a price ceiling on football tickets at colleges. Now, let's talk about a price ceiling and the consequences of it with rent. You previously, maybe in the previous videos, heard about rent, but you didn't hear one other thing that happens when you have a price ceiling. Yes, there's usually less supplied apartments for rent when someone's forced to only rent at a certain price and no more. But what ends up happening, which can be bad, is that your landlord, per se, there might be some landlords in here that might be willing to break the law, and they might be able to say, hey, I'll let you rent in this apartment but you're gonna have to pay, maybe even $7, nice, 7,000, 8,000 or something, because technically what we're doing here is illegal, um, and so that might happen, or they might keep it down here just above the 4,000, make it 4,500 or something, and they might then have someone rent there, and then of course if um, let's say something happens to the apartment, so the toilet clogged or something, they might just say, sorry, we're not fixing that. You have to deal with that on your own. And because in a sense, you're breaking the law, and so they can take advantage of you, um, and 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 so that's another problem. Is that when the black market emerges, there's plenty of people who can take advantage of those people who are paying above the equilibrium price so they can get an apartment. Um, and there's a group called actually the Rent is Too Damn High Party of New York that actually has had a person run for president, um, and trying to argue that rent is too high. And what's happened in some of the places where this has happened, the supply curve ends up eventually, like these people right here, they rent their apartments out, but they're not making as much money, and they don't have as much money to do upkeep on the apartments, and eventually they say, you know what, uh, I'm not going to put money into this apartment building. I'm going to take it off the market and put it into something else, or just like it, leaky faucets and stuff like that create mildew, and they end up getting condemned um, because of requirements for health safety, and then you end up having the supply curve actually shift up to the left. It decreases, supply decreases of apartment buildings out there. So a price ceiling can actually exacerbate a problem, um, like a shortage of housing for people trying to live in a big city. Um, so just another, cost benefit, something to think about when it comes to price ceilings and price floors. So again, a reminder, your homework is to do the two advantages and two disadvantages, two more of them. And question 17 is asking you about heart transplants. And so we'll talk about heart transplants when I see you next. All right, peace.